Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. I usually have a story in the beginning, and I'm just not going to tell one today because I'm trying. I went on this really, I will say something. I went on this really nice walk this morning. I talk about walking a lot. Dr. Tracy, we're going to talk about this. It helps with my anxiety and my mental health. So I talk about it. I went up for a walk this morning with one of my friends, and we were talking about just like how sometimes in life we all go through really hard periods. Like life is all about ebbs and flows. And I talk a lot on the podcast about grief and loss and just my own family losses that I've gone through in my life. And I started thinking about and talking to her about the fact that when I was in 2020, in like COVID, amid like the most horrible things in my life, I didn't want to go on dealing with major panic attacks, suicidal ideations, all the things that I've talked about, that I'm pretty proud of myself that I'm still here. And this is a friend that's kind of going through it right now. And I was trying to remind her that in the worst times, like if you would have told me today, it's 2026, if you would have told me in 2020 that I would still be here, I would have made like all new friends. I would have, I mean, life's not perfect. We're kind of in like a shit show right now in the country and the world, but just that I'm still here and I'm bringing new stuff to the table and I'm meeting new people and I'm doing what I do that I love to do every week. I don't know. It just kind of reiterates how you just never know. And they say all the time, will this matter to you in 5 years? So I kind of want to reiterate that. I'm using the word reiterate a lot today. I want to remind you of that. Somebody told me that once and they said, will this, but before you write an email or you yell at someone or you lose it over something, say to yourself, will this matter to me in 5 years? And I think that has kind of helped me along the way because the things that bothered me 6 years ago, I don't really even think about anymore. So I would like to introduce, I thank God I have a therapist on today. We have a lot to unpack. I would like to introduce Dr. Tracy Foose, who is an anxiety specialist and a former, do you want me to say former professor, but still on staff at UCSF? Big mouthful. And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's a mouthful, UCSF. I was the director of the anxiety disorders program there for 9 years. I still teach there, but now I have a practice in the community and I specialize totally all the time, all anxiety all the time, teaching about anxiety, treating anxiety, writing about anxiety. That's I live, eat, sleep, and breathe anxiety. And I'm a highly anxious person myself, so I'm steeped in it.
Well, you came to the right place. So welcome. I just talked about my
Thank you.
anxiety, my lifelong anxiety that I've struggled with my entire life, panic attacks, all the things. The reason my older sister, who's my BFF, sent me your Instagram and there was a snippet and we were talking about it before we started recording and she said you need to have her on. So how weird is that, how life kind of happens? Can you talk about that? We were talking about it before we started recording that you just joined Instagram and how it's kind of taken off. Can you tell my listeners about that?
Yeah, I had a very full practice. I wasn't able to take new people. Even the wait list got kind of overwhelming and unfair to people to kind of keep them waiting that long to see a provider. And so I thought maybe I can bring some of what I talk about, some of my approach, more to the public. I do a lot of public speaking, but usually that's at schools or companies, that kind of thing. And I thought, what if I just try and reduce it into little snippets, little playful snippets, and put it out there on Instagram. And I started doing that. I guess it's been about 5 weeks now, or maybe 5.5 weeks. But at the 4 week mark, something, and it may have been the reel that you saw, but something that I put out there really resonated with people. I talked about how anxiety is our guard dog. It's trying to keep us safe. It's not always the wisest guard dog. Sometimes it barks at nothing. but that actually our enemy is avoidance. And that if we shift our focus from being afraid of or feeling like we have to get rid of anxiety to actually being afraid of avoidance and trying to get rid of avoidance, then anxiety can be an informative ally, and avoidance is the thing we're pushing back against. And that seems to have resonated with people. I had 160 followers and it got 1.5 million views. So it just exploded. And then I had a ton of people start to follow my content, which is all reframing anxiety as a strength, as something to be harnessed, and some people it rubs the wrong way. But others found great comfort in that, in refocusing their attention away from anxiety, accepting the fact that they're a highly anxious person, and focusing on avoidance. So that was 5 weeks. Well, that was about a week and a half ago when I blew up.
Okay, so number one, I think you could give a lesson to some Instagram, like people. I've been on Instagram 5 million years and I have never gotten a post with that many views and likes. I don't understand the algorithm, but clearly there's a lot of people out there that needed to hear that, myself included. I've always struggled with bad panic attacks and anxiety and felt like there was something wrong with me, and
Yeah.
that I'm like crazy. People will say you're crazy. I can tell you very recently, I think as I've gotten older too, I go it like ebbs and flows, where I feel like my panic attacks sometimes get really bad over and in weird periods that I don't expect. So I'll give you an example. Recently we were in Mendocino, so your neck of the woods. I live in
Yeah.
LA. It's so beautiful there. We drove there over New Year's for a wedding. And my husband, we had rented a car and we drove with our two dogs. And we parked, because he wanted to go see the trees. And so he pulled off to the side of the road and he parked the car and he was like, let's get out. And all of a sudden, like my anxiety went, no, no, no. I can't get out of the car. What if I slip? There's nobody around us. What if it's raining and the kids slip, or what if there's a bad person out there that's this is the kind of stuff that my brain, my tiny brain, I'm joking, says to me. And then this narrative, and then my husband got all mad at me. He's like, you're going to ruin this, like you have to calm down. Turned into this giant fight. And then I just went and sat in the car. And then so I feel like I had to say that, and I'm sorry for the long-winded story, but it's something I've always struggled with, and it's always been something that makes me feel sad, like I'm missing out in my life because I'm afraid to take chances all the time.
Yeah. 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 And in that situation, your brain is trying to warn you of all the things that could go wrong. And it's not the logical, mathematical running outcome scenarios that are based on like real probability part of your brain. It's a deep animal part of your brain that got the idea, I just have a feeling something bad is going to happen. How do I make sense of this feeling? What are all the bad things that could happen in this particular context? It's raining, we're in a foreign place, we could fall, we could slip, a tree branch could fall on us, right? You're this deep instinctive animal part of you has an inkling of something that is not without value or without merit, but then it kind of it spins it up. It becomes a feedback loop, right? So that your body starts to get activated, and then your body's activation tells that deep part of your brain, look, the body's responding to a threat. This must really be a threat. And you get into this kind of hurricane of physical response, emotional response. But if you say, hey, thank you for reminding me it's wet out there, we could slip. And how should we prepare for that? And how can I talk to my family and say, hey, I just got a really super uneasy feeling about this terrain. And maybe this feels over the top, but I want us to be really careful as we navigate this terrain, as it's wet, we're on the roadside. So a lot of it is about respecting anxiety, talking to it and about it as if it is something that evolved to keep you safe. Because guess what? It is. That's why it exists. So, and even panic is so scary because it makes us feel out of control. It's often triggered by signals our body is trying to tell us, like, hey, you're a little dehydrated. You're a little hungry. You didn't sleep that well last night. But because our body sort of does overkill, like as if it's trying to prepare us to fight off a bear instead of reminding us we need like some saltines out of the glove compartment, it's the overkill ends up scaring us instead of warning us. So getting our relationship with anxiety into a positive place when we're wired to be highly anxious, to have this really overblown reaction, it's hard. It's really hard. It requires a heavy lift on the part of our brain.
I love that you kind of made me feel better about it, because it's something I've struggled with my whole life. And I think there's a lot of people out there that can relate to that. And so instead of being like, there's something wrong with me, this, and this, I think about when you say something like that, that it makes me feel like maybe I'm not crazy and it's okay. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Okay. I want to find out about you, but I did want to I don't know why I told that story, but I think I have a lot of stories. So we'll be here all day, everyone. I'm joking. So tell me about you. Why did you get into this? Where are you originally from?
Oh, I grew up in Frankfurt, Philadelphia. And there I have a whole backstory, but I grew up in Frankfurt, which is a little scrappy. So I definitely grew up kind of, a little scrappy, ready to throw down on the playground, since that's kind of how things were resolved back then. And then I moved to Princeton, New Jersey when I think I was in about fifth or sixth grade. And that was a huge cultural adjustment. So I often talk about the social anxiety that I carry around, which is pretty hefty. I trace back toward middle school, toward feeling like I just couldn't figure out who I was supposed to be accepted by the pack. Princeton, New Jersey was definitely not a place you would throw down on the playground. It had sort of a more sophisticated way of breaking you apart psychologically. Maybe that's middle school too. And then I grew up, went to school, decided I wanted to be a doctor, thought I wanted to be a surgeon, and got pretty deep into becoming a surgeon. It, was going to apply in surgery in my fourth year of medical school, and just started to think, I'm not sure this is a good cultural fit for me. I found the culture of surgery was pretty literal, less silly, less humorous. And that may have been where I was going to med school too. Columbia's surgical department took itself very seriously. And I remember just thinking, I don't know if I really belong here. I went to talk to the dean of the medical school. I was like, my whole dream has been doing surgery. I love doing it, but I don't feel like a surgeon. I don't feel like I'm wired like a surgeon. I don't feel like I fit in with the surgeons. And she said, have you ever considered psychiatry? And I was like, oh, absolutely not. No, but thank you. And she said, well, I'm a psychiatrist, and it's afforded me the opportunity to do so much else, to be dean of the medical school, to see patients, to also do research. So I started to think about it more, and made a very last minute switch from surgery to psychiatry. So that's sort of how I ended up there. A lot of impulsive changes led to me being a psychiatrist.
I think that I love that you bring that up, though, that, the defining moments of middle school. I have a middle schooler right now. I was actually this morning talking to my friend about this, how it's such a difficult time,
It is.
and you
Yeah.
bring it into your adulthood. I mean, I still have flashbacks of being in, my youngest is in sixth grade, of wanting so desperately to fit in, and not, I was different. I loved theater and dance, and I was such a kid that wanted so badly just to be liked. I'm still
Yes.
like that as an adult, but it's a hard period of your life. I think it's one of the hardest periods of your life, don't you?
Yes. And it's fascinating looking at it from a brain development standpoint. We have these different we call them developmental fears. Like when we're little, we're afraid of the dark. Then we get the concept of mortality around 4 or 5. We get really worried that people we love are going to die or get sick.
Mm.
Then we get a little older. We start to get worried about fitting in socially. But that fitting in socially piece really peaks somewhere between age 13 and 16. And if we look at ourselves as primates, that's probably when we started to leave the pack and look for or consider the possibility of finding a new pack. And so it became imperative that we picked up on these social cues of acceptance or rejection. It was literally life and death. And we still have that wiring. We still have that developmental fear at that age where fitting in or not fitting in feels very life and death, and in many ways is somewhat life and death. And it shapes our brain big time, big time. So yeah, that is when I sense rejection, I become middle school me. I just zoop, like travel back through time. I'm in that body. I have those braces. I have the awkward plastic glasses that are yellow on top and blue on the bottom. I have the frizzy hair, all of it. I'm in that state. It's so palpable for me.
It's almost like where wherever you are in your family dynamic, when you go
Yes.
home, you've come back to like, I'm middle child, second to youngest Meghan. No matter what I
Yeah.
do, right? No matter what kind of success or whatever I do in my life, I will always fight with my younger brother. We'll always be like jabbing at each other. And I will always end up feeling upset at some point of some dinner that I'm different than all my other siblings. It's the same thing. And
Yes.
then you bring that into your adulthood. I almost feel like it's good that they have to go through this
Yes, I
and that
agree.
we had to go through this, but it's also as a parent, as a mother, my youngest is pretty resilient, and she's one of those kids that she just wants to like go off and sing and dance and be on a Disney show. Like she doesn't really care what anyone thinks of her. I'm like, I wish I was more like you, but I am noticing this is happening and so said this, and your heart kind of breaks because it brings you back to that time. It brings my brain back to that time, and I remember how hard it was.
Yes. Yeah. And we can talk about it with the wisdom of our lived experience, but they are also so in it, in their own world, and the degree to which they can take in our wisdom is somewhat limited because, they're prioritizing what their peers think more than anything right now. So, yeah, I think that's another good thing to normalize. Sometimes I think we can feel like we're failing as parents, that it's so clear our children are prioritizing what peers think, but to understand that is really evolutionarily baked in, and we have to trust that the wisdom we've imparted is in there too, but that their brain is so focused on peer group at that point, just wired to be.
And then also bringing it into adulthood, because I'm like that too. Like where you brought up like going to a party or something, you just as people, we just want to fit in. We want to be liked. We want to have things in common. Another thing you talked about is that you were on this path to becoming a surgeon and then took the shift, which I always love hearing, doctors in general, that they are set on this path or whatever it is in your life. You're set on a path. You think that's what you're supposed to do. And then you take another turn. And I think that's one of the best things about being alive.
Yes.
I talk about it all the time. I moved out to LA to be an actress, didn't work out, went into a long sales career. Now I'm doing a podcast. Who knows what's next? I could become like, I don't know what my other options could be at this age, but you never know.
The sky's the limit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. I love that you brought that up. And I think it's important as women that we teach younger women that it's okay to be set on a path. I mean, you went to obviously a very hard school and were a surgeon and then took a shift and decided to go another direction. So I always admire people that do that. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think the biggest for women in particular, and anybody who has a fair amount of I think anxiety or perfectionism, we can get really rigidly locked into a path. I'll often tell people I work with, winners are defined by the rules of the game. And you don't have to be defined by the rules of the game. You can actually change the rules of the game or play another game entirely. But we can get really stuck on one path. And the biggest hurdle is literally just giving yourself permission to try something new and maybe be bad at it for a while. Maybe you have to work a long time at gaining mastery in a new domain. But yeah, it's the permission is kind of the wall you have to break through. It's not an ability wall, which we all think it is. It's really like as you said, I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to make this shift.
I think too, like now with everything, we've kind of taken a step back as a society where we were starting to see women lifting women up in their professions. Women were, I think about the example of the Olympics right now with the female hockey team, and how disappointed I've been by the fact that, they haven't gotten the same accolades. And in, medicine or whatever your career is as female, you have to do the work, be good at the work, but do it even better than everyone else, because we have that we're female. So it's harder, right?
Yeah. I had this attending who, when we were in medical school, and it was actually on the surgical rotation, she said the funniest, meanest thing. It was me and a bunch of other women. We were rotating together on this particular service and rounding and talking about patients. And she said, I'm just so glad to see that we've come so far, because when I went to medical school, I had to be 100 times better than any of the men. And you guys are just kind of average. But I remember taking that with a bit of humility, and also like, okay, yeah, I guess she lived through the time where you had to be superhuman to achieve. And she's saying, we've made it in medicine, but that was about 20 years ago. And I think we are in a weird place right now with women. We're like fetishizing fearlessness and a couple of other traits. Like we're really into lack of empathy as a sign of strength, which is kind of weird. That goes against like 2,000 years of religion and philosophy and government. It's just weird to say like empathy is weakness. That has not been a human belief, but we're seeing that pop up everywhere right now. It's kind of trending. And
I don't understand it. It's so strange. It's like we all work so hard to get here to be for women to be able to get like open a credit card, for example, or get out a bank loan or buy a car by themselves. And then there's women now that are saying, no, we don't want to do this anymore. And so it's just such a weird time. I don't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we saw a little bit of this in like 1930s Germany, where there was just a lot of rapid change and development. And Germany was kind of like going off the rails as far as economic success, but also cultural change, dramatic cultural change. They were also really ahead of the game with regard to sort of technological development, especially around the area of physics. And it's interesting because they kind of freaked themselves out, right? And they backslid into this incredibly, right? Empathy wasn't cool. We're going to kill a bunch of people, blame them for everything. We're going to lock down into these really rigid ways of thinking. And we're going to suffer for it for like a decade as a country. And there are a lot of patterns of kind of freaking ourselves out in this time of great and rapid social change, technological change. And, I am no philosopher and I'm no historian, but you just kind of look at like sociologically, what do humans do when change is so rapid that it freaks us out? And we're the ones initiating the change. But then we reverse it real fast. Like, oh, just kidding. I don't want the change. I don't, I want to stay at home. And this feels really scary. And yeah, it's fascinating. But not to say that moms who stay at home aren't doing God's work, because they are, but more just that sense you don't have a choice. The removal of choice is an interesting thing that I think we do in reaction to fear sometimes.
I think too, it's like be careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I think it's a slippery slope, but that's why you're here because we're going to talk all about anxiety and how it can be like I hate to say a superpower, but for me personally, like I talked about, just always struggling. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD a few years ago, stemming from I witnessed my sister die when I was 2. So
Mm.
my brain could not like so that's part of why I am the way that I am. And
Yeah.
I love that you talk about anxiety the way that you do because it's I've always felt like what's wrong with me? I'm crazy. If I go to a movie, for example, I always need to look where the exits are. Or, there's periods where I'm on an escalator and I go, "Oh my God, what if the escalator breaks?" And like I get caught in that like there's when you're somebody that lives with anxiety or panic attacks, they can be debilitating and take
Yeah.
over your whole life. And I love your approach to saying this isn't bad. This actually part of part of this makes me the creative person I am. Part of me makes this the empathetic person I am because I am drawn to people like you that can talk about it and say, this is okay. Just look at it a different way, right? So can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I think your loss and witnessing loss like that when you're a child, we know that that shapes the brain. That's when I talk about having a highly anxious temperament, I'm talking about traits that you're born with, traits that are genetic. But you take that temperament, or even not that temperament, and you expose a child to loss that she's witnessed. It changes her whole worldview at the level of her neurons, at the level of her brain. It becomes possible to lose people you love right before your eyes. And so if you think about that rainy day and deciding whether or not to leave the car, and you get an image of something happening to someone you love, your brain says, not only could this happen, I've actually witnessed it happen. I know that it's a possibility. And you're going to live with that for your whole life. You have experienced the fragility of human life, our mortality firsthand. Most of us haven't, especially not as children. We just don't comprehend how mortal and fragile we are. And highly anxious people do. They have a much more tangible sense of the fragility of life and they anticipate things that could go wrong. But anyone who's lived through something traumatic has gained that knowledge as well.
Can you tell me what are some things that I know you're writing a book and there's things that you have in the works right now. Tell me some if you're somebody that's like me, I'll just use myself as an example because I love to. That struggles with the things like going to the movie theater. Are there tips that you tell your patients or you tell people to be able to deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, the first one you've heard me say already, which is not fighting anxiety, but thanking it.
Hmm.
So really laying that groundwork of like, hey, I see you, I'm listening to you, I understand what you're trying to tell me. And also, I'm going to make this brave choice to do this thing. And then when you're making the brave choices, you want to think of it like going to the gym, right? If you want to go to the gym and become strong in a particular area, a particular muscle group, you don't go and on the first day, like bench press 200 pounds because you would get hurt. So what you do is you start by bench pressing the bar, right? And every time you go back, you add a little bit of weight. And that's the approach to exposing yourself to things that feel scary and overwhelming. You want to thank your anxiety for warning you. You want to congratulate yourself for doing a hard, brave thing. And then you want to pick a weight that's appropriate to start with. So you might not go to like IMAX that's an hour away from home. You might go to the little like boutique theater down the road that has 50 seats. Sorry, I swallowed a frog there. Um,
It happens.
yeah, but that's easing yourself in and really thinking about when we're training the brain to do something. It's really not that much different than training any tissue in the body to adjust to something. It's not that much different than lifting weights. It's not that much different from stretching, right? We don't go to 100 when we're trying to make change in our body. We build up to it.
So do you believe in, like, for somebody that's struggling with anxiety, that like medicine's the answer? I'm just asking, or are there
Hugely
ways?
helpful tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are a hugely helpful tool. They do something, they don't, again, with this idea of being broken and needing fixing, they don't correct a quote unquote chemical imbalance. It's not how they work. They do stuff with serotonin. They trigger our serotonergic system, that system of communicating using that particular neurotransmitter in ways that we don't understand entirely why, result in what's called increased neuroplasticity. So there is something about the binding pattern of that most common class of medications we use for anxiety, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors,
Hmm.
that gets our brain to a plastic state, meaning it's more open to making new connections, thinking new thoughts. Exercise does the same thing. If you want to use medications and exercising, you're really, they have even more than an additive effect. They really kind of enhance one another. That's the area of, that's why people are so excited about certain hallucinogenic drugs, like that bind, for the particular class, they bind to this specific serotonin receptor, the 5-HT2A receptor, things like magic mushrooms, LSD. There's some other stuff in this category that sound scary, to those of us who grew up in the like drugs will make you lose control. But there's
Hmm.
something about those agents as well that promotes neuroplasticity. That's why people are studying them right now and seeing, can we do this maybe without some of the hallucinogenic effects? But these are all things, and I don't have any skin in the game as to how you get to neuroplasticity. But neuroplasticity allows your brain to be something that you can shape more easily when you go to work it out. And our brain doesn't love changing. It doesn't really, it doesn't embrace being plastic because it's very attached to the things it's learned. It's very attached to its automatic responses. So it is really helpful sometimes to nudge it in a direction of greater plasticity, greater openness, as we're also doing this work, like exposing ourselves to hard things. So I'm not pro meds or
Hmm.
against meds. It's whatever people feel comfortable with. They can be a really effective tool, though, and it's helpful to know why and how they're working and what you're going for.
I think too, right now, I talk about being a mom. I have two daughters. That what the kids go through these days, like with obviously social media and all these lawsuits coming forward. There's a reason why there's all these lawsuits coming forward. Um, what do you say to parents of teenagers that are dealing with anxiety, and medication and tools and tips for people that are parents right now?
I mean, a lot of the same stuff that applies to adults. So thinking about, what can we do to increase neuroplasticity? Could we get this teen more active? Would they join a sport? Would they start walking? Would they start jogging with mom and dad? Should we take them to see somebody and ask, is a medication helpful, appropriate in this case? And the other thing that we can do with teens is we can model for them. We can talk about our own anxiety. And that is such a gift to teens. And I have so many parents in my practice who are worried they're going to stress their kids out by showing their kids that they have anxiety. And I'm like, trust me, it is so reassuring as a kid who has anxiety to realize that this does not mean you're broken. This does not mean you're not measuring up to the family norm or ideal. This is actually something you can watch adults have and then push through. So you can watch an adult who says, oh, I have a ton of anxiety about this thing, or here's how I felt at work today, and here's the hard, brave thing that I pushed myself to do. So you really want your kids to know that you have these same feelings, that you're wired the same way they are, and then you want to show them, here's how I overcome avoidance. Here's how I resist, giving up and going home when work gets hard or socializing gets hard. Because teens' brains are often, as we talked about middle school, this is often when a kid who hasn't struggled much with anxiety will start to have anxiety. And it's not just because the environment is hard, which it
Mhm.
is, but it's also when our brain is doing a lot of changing on its own. A lot of new synapses are forming. A lot of pruning is happening. And if we have a genetic predisposition to anxiety and depression, in fact, our teens and 20s are often where they appear, and it can hit kids, it can really sideswipe them. And they're like, what? I've never been anxious. What is this about? And as a parent, if you can tell them, oh, yeah, you're coming into adulthood. This is what adulthood feels like sometimes, this weightiness, this responsibility, this anticipating the possibility of dreadful things happening. Yeah, this is reality, and here's how we push against, the darkness and find the light. And yeah.
There's a lot of moms that listen to my podcast. So I mentioned I have a 12-year-old. I also have a 16-year-old daughter. And she's going to kill me. So I'm going to pivot and like make up the story to be different because I don't want her to be mad at me. So she wants to go on this trip, and I'm again, it's all of my anxiety coming through. But when she leaves the house, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that can relate to this, and, getting her driver's license, not there yet, but goes to a party. I sit there going, oh my God, what if, again, what if this happens to her? What if that happens to her? Should I not let her go? I would love your advice on that, because I know there's a lot of moms that have kids that are probably in this age range, and we're all going, I don't want my kid to leave the house, but we have to learn to let them leave the house.
Yeah, it's
right?
So hard. I have a 17-year-old, 14-year-old, and 11-year-old, and they're all wild women.
Oh, you have all girls?
All girls.
Oh, so you know what I'm talking about.
And I have this talk with myself all the time. I mean, every time my 17-year-old drives, it is that it is inevitable that they need to go off into the world, and that I want them to practice going off into the world when they still have a safe home base to come back to, when I'm still watching them, aware of what they're doing, aware of where they are. I want them to be exposed to being at parties where there's alcohol, needing to figure out who they're going to drive home, because later on they're not going to have me close at hand. And I don't want them to be so protected from the world that when they get out into it, they've never even navigated it. They have no sense of what to do. And when I was a teenager, I had a super anxious mom, and I just lied to her all the time. Bless her soul. She was such a loving mom. She did not know where I was. I was sometimes in New York City when she thought I was at a sleepover in Princeton, New Jersey, right? And my anxiety was social, right? So I just wanted to fit in. But I needed that independence. I needed to learn how to navigate the world. And because I was brought up with so much love, I think, trust how protective your love is, that your child feels valuable, that they do not want to put themselves in harm's way. They still do. They're teenagers. But a valued child understands they have something to live for, understands they have a future. And so when they take risks, when they explore the world, they want to keep living it. And I think the kids who are in the greatest danger are the ones who don't feel cared about, who don't feel worried about. But kids who feel worried about, who are still allowed to go out and engage with the world, but know they have someone at home worried about them, they feel valued and they feel responsible for bringing themselves home in one piece. I think that's all you can do. At some point, we have to let them go.
I think I needed to hear that, so thank you. But I think it's so hard. I mean, it's so hard. When your kids were little and you thought it was such a hard time chasing them, right? And your pants are falling down and you're sweating at the park. But then every stage starts to get hard in different ways. I personally think that this is by far the hardest stage, because if she's out at like 11 o'clock at night, I start to go, oh my God, where is she? Where is she? Where is she? And all of that PTSD that I personally have, I'm sure other moms have that too. But it's true. I have to be better about letting her loose a little bit. She will be going to college in a couple of years. So my husband and I are trying to be better about it. But I love that you said that because it's a reminder that she is loved, even though she doesn't think she is. And she says like how much she can't stand us and how strict,
Only loved
how
childs
strict we
feel
are.
loved enough to tell us that we don't love them.
I mean, I just feel like I could do like a whole series on the teen like parenting stuff that you had no idea when you have a baby and you bring the baby home that you were in for.
Oh, I remember being pregnant and
Uh-huh.
talking to friends about my fear of losing the pregnancy. And my friend who had young babies or young kids, they were like, "You're worried now about losing a pregnancy. You're carrying that little being around, sheltered inside you. Wait until your entire heart is running around in the world outside of your grasp." And I was like, "Oh, God."
No, but there's a reason. This is true, though. There's a reason why, like women in particular, when your child flies the coop and goes to college, are it's trauma. I mean, I
It
have
is.
friends
It's
that have
really
gone
hard.
through this, and people don't really talk about it. And it's I've saw one of my friends go through. I've had multiple friends now go through it, but friend of mine would not leave her house for weeks. She was so upset.
Yeah, I just had lunch yesterday with a good friend who's a
Yeah,
therapist
yeah.
who was like, "I'd been preparing myself for this. I've watched this happen to friends, to clients. I had been ready for this. And my son couldn't wait to leave. He was so ready to leave. I thought it was just going to be one big celebration." And she said, "I was a mess for 3 weeks. It took me 3 weeks to feel positive about this." And I was like, "Oh boy, I'm going to go through it 3 times."
I mean, you're going to go through it 3 times with girls too, and
Yes.
girls are really hard. Like boys are hard in different ways. The last thing I'll say about this is, and it's kind of funny. It's only me. I'm a very emotional person. Clearly, you were talking, and I started tearing up. We were doing our guidance counselor meetings, and they're already talking about colleges and asking her, "Where are you thinking about? Like, what are you thinking about doing?" And the counselor, I think, looked at me and was like, "This woman is crazy." I started, I started to cry in the middle of this meeting with the teacher. I don't even think my husband noticed or my daughter because she would have been so mad at me. But I started to cry and I started going, "Oh my God, she's leaving in 2 years, like 2.5 years. She's going to be gone." And then the whole thing. And I had to catch myself from starting to just bawl crying in this office. But I think it's true. I mean, I know we're going off topic, but I think there's so many people that are probably listening and can relate to all of this stuff. It's the thing about life that's so hard and being a parent is your children aren't yours forever. They're on borrowed time, right?
Yeah. And I think it's not entirely off topic in the sense that most of our brain is devoted to survival stuff and survival of our offspring.
Mhm.
And then what's left, most of the real estate that's left is actually devoted to attachment wiring. And that's just a fancy psychological term we use for love. And so if you think about it, our brain is pretty much like, how do I stay alive? How do I keep everybody else alive? And how do I stay close to the people I love? And that's sort of all our brain is doing. And then there's like, 5% of it that's like, let me sort out my taxes and, let me do this podcast today. But most of it is about survival and love. And they kind of play off each other. So what I tell patients who are really anxious about letting go of loved ones, even losing loved ones through death, is we have to use our attachment wiring. We have to use love to realize that is the one connection that transcends death. We are not always physically close to the people we love. Sometimes they're on the other side of the planet. Sometimes they're gone. But the fact that they loved us and that we loved them and that they know that we loved them and that they know we know they loved us, that powerful, like kind of, I always think of it as like this glowing like link.
Yeah.
That's what I send my kids out into the world with. I have to face the fact every time I hear a siren and my kids are at school or they left to go to a party or you name it, I'm like, they're dead. They're dead. That's what it means. That's what my brain tells me. And I have to say on some level, and maybe this sounds crazy morbid, if they are, they know they were loved. I have to say, probably not. Thank you for reminding me that they could be. Thanks for reminding me that everyone I love is mortal. My God, anxiety. How could you be so cruel? But right, it's reality. And then I try and remind myself, my kids know they're loved, and that is the only way I can hold on to them that actually transcends our collective mortality. I mean, someday I'll be gone, right? But they will still have that deep sense of love. And that is a great way to manage anxiety, is to actually drop into that place of, I can't control the universe, but I can control whether or not my kids receive love from me.
I'm like saying love a lot. We're saying love a lot, but I do love that because it's so important. And I do talk about loss all the time. I think I posted something yesterday about knowing it was about my dad because I lost my dad as a little girl, that the best parts of me are my dad. So I know that I'm still the parts of me that, because I can be a really big giant pain in the ass. There's a lot of people that can tell you that about me, including my husband and my kids. The best parts of me and the biggest love that I feel from my dad that's not here anymore is the parts of me that are kind. Like if I do something kind in a day, I know
Yeah.
that's my dad shining through. And so the piece of what you just said really struck me because I do want my kids to always know that they're loved. And I am going to use that now when I hear a siren or any of the things that go through my brain. It's tips and tricks, right? To
Yeah.
get
Yep.
through these kinds of things. Because there's so many people in the country, in the world that are dealing with debilitating anxiety right now.
Yeah. And trauma, live trauma, right? And
Yeah.
awareness that you can lose people you love, that horrible things can happen. I mean, that's very real for a very large number of people who are living in this world. But to realize, I can lose people that I love, but they'll know that I loved them. And I will take that with me for my whole life. They will never be forgotten. They will live in me. It's the best we can do as mortal creatures. It's really the only comfort we have. We can't, much as some tech bros might tell you, we can't outsmart mortality. Like we just, at some point it comes for us all. It's like the club where, we're all on the list.
Yeah.
We're going to get in
There's a
someday.
commercial that's on for like life insurance right now, and I hear it all the time, and I get so mad because it's this commercial and this guy's like, "We're all going to die. We're going to die." I'm sure you've heard it, and I'm like, I don't really want to hear this commercial right
No.
now on my speed walk. Thank you so much, but it is true, and we don't in our culture like celebrate, like we all are born, we all come into the world, we all go out. So it's a reminder to really sit in the moments because they're so fleeting and they go by so fast, right?
Yeah.
Especially being a parent. We talked a lot about being a parent. In closing, I would love to know like a few tips. I mean, we've talked about a lot of tips, but anything that you can give my listeners to kind of get through this period of time, because our suicide rates are the highest they've ever been. Like you just had 1 million hits on your posts that you talked about on Instagram. There's a reason why people are just, they want this information because people want to find ways. It's like we're all in this maze and we're trying to find a way out. So give my listeners some good tips right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big one is to challenge this idea of brokenness or sickness that we have about ourselves, because that really helps us to be more authentic and vulnerable about the real substance of who we are. And then that makes it safer for everybody who has anxiety to feel like they can be authentic, talk about what it's like to live with that. I think that when we're trying to motivate ourselves to do something, one thing I notice in my own life that probably has one of the most dramatic impacts on my day-to-day mental health is when I can catch myself motivating myself with shame. And I call those stick thoughts. Like I imagine a horse that's trying to pull something heavy up a hill, and I'm like beating it or poking it with a stick, right? I'm like, you better do the laundry. Look what a mess this is, right? And instead, I try to replace those thoughts with carrot thoughts. So I'm like, that's a lot of laundry. that is a big undertaking, and you're doing it for your family. And when it's done, it's going to feel so good and you want to have it done. And also, you can put on a great podcast or a movie or your favorite playlist and fold it and sing along. So I try to shift out of this very punitive motivation that's my automatic approach to like lighting a fire under my butt by saying, you know, you should do this, you better do this, you're worthless if you don't. And catching it and reframing it and working toward this self-kindness in my own head. We all know this, but again, it's one of these things we don't give ourselves permission to do it. We're afraid of positive motivation. We're like, oh, if I tell myself it's just going to feel good to have the laundry done, that's not going to be as motivating as shame. So I'm not even going to try it. I probably catch myself like 1 out of 10 times that I'm using shame to motivate myself. And just that switch, like a 10% of the time catch and switch, makes me feel so much better about myself, so much more resilient, so much more ready to tackle hard things because I'm feeling that courage and bravery, and I'm just seeing myself through a different lens. I don't always, and I'm a freaking therapist, and I can't catch the amount of shame that I carry around all the time, but I'm doing it little by little. So that's a big one. Yeah, that brokenness, sickness, shame. This is what I'm really trying to do with anxiety, is to help us invite it in, accept it, and not see it as something that's breaking us, and live with it, use it even, thank it even, and then really push back against that voice that says you should avoid trying this, you probably will fail at this, you know, just being like, yeah, I might, that's okay. That's okay. So it's a lot of that growth mindset stuff that I think helps our anxious brains.
I love the stick thoughts. That's such a good, I mean, and by the way, if my husband is listening, there is a lot of laundry right now and I am not going to do it.
Yeah. Also getting people to just help with the laundry.
I'm like,
yeah.
Maybe my kids could actually bring their laundry baskets, and you have 3. So I can't even imagine how much laundry is in your house.
They're good. I was so incompetent about being timely. This is another good tip, is actually doing less. Doing less. People who are highly anxious tend to absorb a ton of responsibility without even questioning it. They don't even see it. It's compulsive absorption of responsibility. We call it internalizing responsibility, and it's a feature of anxiety disorders. And so realizing, wait, other people could do this. And especially if I am just kind of don't get it done, just kind of incompetent, other people may pick up the slack. It'll take a while. The laundry piles will grow. But yeah, my teens now get impatient and they just bring their laundry down and do it themselves. And that is because I was such a terrible laundress that finally I broke that pattern.
Okay, well, we share that in common because I'm pretty bad. I'm actually surrounded, but you can't see it on camera right now, but there's a laundry basket right at the table
I love it.
next to
I
me.
love it.
So how fitting. Dr. Tracy, or Tracy, you said I could call you Tracy in the
I'm
beginning.
easy.
I loved having you on. I love talking to you. I think right now, listeners, if this is so needed. We need to talk about anxiety, depression. We need to go easy on ourselves. There's so much out there that's constantly. P.S. Let me just say, because we brought up primates in the beginning, that freaking monkey. What is it? I forget the monkey's name. It's like Punch.
Yeah,
Go watch
that broke people.
Me. It broke me. And then Punch now has like a stepmom,
Yeah.
and the stepmom's hugging Punch. So I feel like what I want to say is, if Punch could find somebody and like another ape is going to take Punch in, we all have hope. That's what I'm trying to say. It's going to be okay. And I like to reiterate using that word for the 500th time this episode, that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
To go easy on yourselves, to talk kindly, to use the stick. And I love that stick, and the
Carrot,
stick thoughts and stick and carrots is huge. So where can people find you?
I am newly on Instagram, and it's just me, Tracy Foose, MD, and I am just flooding it with all the content and tips about how to reframe anxiety, why you'd want to, talking about neuroplasticity, talking about temperament, talking about what's the difference between being highly anxious and having an anxiety disorder. So just trying to get lots of information out there that is helpful, that has a research base behind it, that, where these types of reframes really bring not just a sense of relief, but actually an enhanced performance. There's just such a wonderful body of research, sports psychology research, test-taking research, about when we reframe anxiety as an ally, just how much more powerful we are.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. Listeners, could you do me a quick favor and go to wherever you are, your phone, your computer, your iPad, pull up Apple, pull up Spotify, and leave me a quick review. I'm horrible about asking, and I'm trying to be better and ask at the end of every episode or the beginning. It takes 2 seconds. I'm so appreciative of all of my listeners that have been with me since I started in 2020. Or if you're a new listener, thank you for listening. And in closing, thank you again, Tracy. In closing, you matter, your story matters. Keep going.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.